Hey, this is Pablo with Meditation Amsterdam. And so yesterday I published my video number 60, and I thought that was pretty cool. What's funny is it triggered almost like two or three more ideas for additional clips to make, and this is one of them. And so the topic for this video is this idea of how your system deals with trauma and how trauma is stored in the mind-body matrix, and how you go about creating that storage, and then how you go about sort of cleaning it out, so that you can live in a more in flow, if you will, as opposed to pulled around by your past trauma. So this is a mechanism that we're starting to understand now in the modern world, but which has been quite clearly understood by sort of shamanic type of cultures, and also through methods like yoga, for example. Essentially, what it comes down to is how your mind body works. Is you start to deal with your environment, and you start to have these experiences where you ping off of the environment, and very often those experiences are going to be unpleasant. So you're going to run into trouble in the playground, or a parent will say something, or you'll have all these experiences, and some of them are going to be hurtful. Now, depending on your degree of presence and how sensitive you are to contentious situations, some of those experiences will just wash off, or you'll be upset for a moment, and then you'll be done with it. But it will be sometimes the case that the experience is quite unpleasant, and there's a part of your psyche that detects that the level of unpleasantness of the experience is something that you don't know how to deal with. It's like your system is just not quite prepared for it, or it could be that there's already a circumstance that is stressful enough. So maybe you're juggling already quite a few balls up in the air, and something else comes on top of that to stress you out, and you're like, I can't deal with this right now. So what tends to happen in those instances is there's a kind of a knot, right, that gets stored in your body. But it's not just in your body, it's in your mind as well. So it is kind of stored in that place where mind and body meet, right? So there's this kink in the hose that gets created, and now, as opposed to being this sort of relaxed free flow around that area of the mind body, there's this knot, and there's an area of constriction, if you will, and it's just stored there, and it limits your sort of energetic flow. It limits your ability to go with the flow, literally speaking. Now, if that storage would just stay there and do its thing, that would be fine. But what starts to then happen is that in order to protect you from experiencing that, it kind of gets pushed downwards into the subconscious, but it starts to pull your strings in ways that are unnoticed by you. So you will start to react to situations that subconsciously remind you of the cause of the trauma. Yeah. So somebody will say something that's not so important, or something will happen in the street that is just like not even all that big a deal, or something will happen at work that is not that big a deal, and immediately your subconscious will go, this is the exact same situation, and it is equally hurtful, and I need to equally protect myself. So that kink in the hose will feel like it's being poked, right? And it's gonna make you react in ways that are not quite calibrated and not in accordance to the situation at hand. And these things keep spiraling, and you will acquire habits of avoidance, right? Or not, you won't be open to all circumstances of life, because you have these knots in your system that get poked, and you're trying to protect yourself, and you go like, ooh, I'm going to start avoiding these kind of situations here altogether, because it makes me feel uncomfortable. And the more knots you have in your mind body system, the more situations you are on an avoidance mode, because essentially you don't want your sore spots to get to become irritated, right? And so your life becomes less rich in general, right? When trauma, even small trauma, is not resolved. Now, you would think to yourself, like, why doesn't the mind just let trauma hit you and be done with it? And it's because it's a protective mechanism. Something in you sort of knows that you don't have the tools to deal with certain things at that point in time when they happen. So it just suppresses them, and it stores them in the system to protect you, essentially, from having a psychotic break, perhaps, or something along those lines, or a burnout. But then comes the thing of, okay, so part of your task now. Oh, and by the way, we talked about these kinks being created by events in your life. But as it happens, you already inherit a bunch of them, actually. So there's a bunch of kinks in your system that you are born with, from all the collective unconscious, so to speak, right? All the storage of previous generations who had experiences. That's why you know how to have anxiety, right? Like, and that's why it flares up during certain situations, such as public embarrassment, right? Like your system knows that public embarrassment is akin to death, so it just flares up when things of that kind happen. So you're inheriting quite a bit, and you are adopting a few traumas along the way in your life. And one of your big tasks around here is to resolve those. There are ways to do that. So systematic engaging in mind-body practices, Tai Chi, yoga, meditation, the stuff that I usually mention, are interesting ways to start to do that. So meditation, at least, especially in the initial stages when you're getting to know meditation, is a lot about focus, so that you start to develop the ability to go deeper into your mind body. So the task of resolving trauma and undoing these mind body knots is one that you can't engage with if you don't have a relatively high degree of focus, equanimity, and presence. Yeah, those are the things that you apply to the knots so that they unwind. You use focus so that you can see them with enough degree of clarity and stability. So you want to be able to really look at them and really deeply go into them. And then you want to use presence so that you bring the light of consciousness into that observation. And you want to use equanimity so that you don't keep piling up reactiveness to that observation, but you can observe with perfect stability and neutrality. So when you bring that presence, you bring that neutrality, you bring that sustained focus and quality of observation to the mind-body knots, they begin to unwind. And that's why formal or informal meditation or mind-body practices are very helpful. They over time, they unwind your knots. Now, it may be that during meditations, this is one of the reasons that as people start to meditate, all manner of thoughts start to come to the surface, because you're starting to suddenly unpack all this ongoing train of thought that was happening due to these worries and knots in your system. They start to come up to the surface. And at first people feel overwhelmed by all that stuff, and then later on you learn to see that stream of thought and the unpleasant sensations in the body with full equanimity, and that's what begins to resolve them. So formal practice can definitely help with that. The other thing that can help is, I wouldn't say to take this as the solution for this, but you can have the type of therapies that that sort of amp up your system to bring some of these knots to the surface and have them dissolve. So, for example, rebirth breath therapy, something that I've shown in this channel before. It's a type of pranayama that essentially amps your system up and energizes it so that these knots come to the conscious surface. But because you are breathing in a certain way, you are cultivating that equanimity, and they resolve themselves, right? You can expose those knots, because you have to remember, those knots are buried deep underneath the surface. They're unconscious mind-body knots. And so through meditation or rebirth breath, you can bring those to the surface. And these powerful therapies or psychedelic therapy can also just bring those out in a very powerful way and kind of resolve them, right? So while they remain buried, they remain unresolved, and when they come to the surface, they have a chance to become resolved if you have enough degree of presence and equanimity. So that's another way to start working through those. And a third way, which is often overlooked because it's misunderstood, is being super angry, anxious, or annoyed at a situation outside of you. Right? So life will throw a situation at you. You feel a lot of anger or a lot of anxiety or a lot of sadness. And your first instinct is to go and say, that's a nasty situation and that should not have happened. And that's why I feel angry or sad or anxious. What is actually happening is that the situation somehow clicked with and poked at that sore spot in your psyche, and now your system feels like it's flaring up, and you goes right, and you want to push the situation away when you misunderstand it. But when you start to have enough maturity, that's the reaction of an immature, like an adolescent mind, right? A more mature mind will notice the situation. It'll notice the reaction, and it will notice, hey, that situation teased out this mind-body knot, this trauma that has been suppressed, and now it's been brought to the surface. And without me having to do meditation or ayahuasca trips or God knows what other stuff, it's now been brought up to the surface. And that makes it the perfect opportunity to observe the reaction with presence, focus, and equanimity. And it might not be resolved immediately at that point, but the process of resolving it has begun. And when you have been cultivating your mind and doing meditation and a little bit of breath work and a bit of yoga or mind-body work, your degree of focus, presence, and equanimity will be so high that when trauma flares up due to a situation in your environment and in your life, you will notice it as the perfect opportunity to to address the trauma. And if you're good at that, it will become almost fully or perhaps even fully resolved. as it comes out. And I've begun to experience that now, like really experience it. And the best thing I can compare it to is when you had a this situation where like you're fighting with someone, like you've had a real fundamental disagreement, and you become, there's like there's real conflict with somebody in your mind, and it's also for them, real conflict. It's unresolved conflict is there with somebody, and you're like right, and there's something in you that wants to preserve that because you want to be right. You really want to be right about it. You're right. You're almost indignated. How could they be like that, right? And so you have this contentious relationship with this person. And then at some point you say, you know what? Screw it. Screw being right. I'm going to walk up to this person. I'm going to apologize. We are going to create a situation somehow together. I will be the bigger person in this. I will let the need to be right. I will let it go, and screw it. Fuck it. Right? Like I'm just gonna let it go. And you come up to this person and you say, you know what, man? I've had a second thought about this. I'm so sorry. I was so, I needed to be right, and it's stupid. I want to make this work. And the other person turns around and goes like, Jesus, man, I never expected you to turn around this way. This is so amazing. Let's do it. And suddenly your energy just goes, and it goes through the roof, and you're like, holy shit, it feels so amazing. Man, I feel so connected. I feel so energized. It's almost like you had stopped the flow of life for the sake of being right, and somehow you're connected to it again, and you go, wee, right? Like you feel like, yes, this is awesome, right? And there's this energy just flows again through you. And it's like the energy of reconciliation, right? Like real, just dropping the ego and reconciling with the other, with the other, right? Like that which you call the other, but which is really you, and then you reconcile, and the two of you are feeling amazing about stuff. That surge of energy of reconciliation, that's the best thing that I can compare it to. So it's a long lost friend within you, that trauma. It's that kink in the hose, is that thing that you for the sake of being right, or for the sake of preserving your self-image, you are cutting yourself away from the flow of life. And at some point, a situation happens, or either through meditation, through yoga, through breath work, through a situation in your life, bringing it up, it comes up, and you go, you know what? I'm done fighting with you. I'm gonna let go. I'm going to embrace you. I'm going to observe you with equanimity. I'm going to observe the uncomfortable situation in my body, and I will embrace, right? And I'm not gonna try to be right, because what use is it to be right if you're dead right? There's no use. I'm just gonna embrace this thing, really, like proper. I'm gonna make total friends with it, and then what happens is, that unpleasant knot in your throat and your heart starts to become this amazing vibration, and it just goes like, whoa, right? And then you just feel like suddenly what used to be a kink in the hose now flows through you, and it feels incredible, absolutely incredible. So every time you so here's the thing, right? Meditation, breathwork, yoga are all voluntary ways to try and tease those things out. The reason we dislike ugly situations in our life is that they bring up the trauma, they bring it to the surface, but it's involuntary, right? You didn't ask for it. You didn't ask for the trauma to be flared up. And so you go, oh, right? But if you have enough maturity of mind and enough presence in you, you see it flaring up, and you go, thanks. I wasn't expecting to resolve trauma right here and now, but since you brought it up, it's as good as time as any to do it, right? Saves me an ayahuasca trip, or saves me a bunch of breath work and tiresome yoga or meditation or whatever. Let's just do it right now. But that means that you're ready. You have to remember that the reason you stored it in your subconscious and you put it like it's got suppressed into the subconscious mind body system is because you weren't ready to tackle it. Your mind was not mature enough to deal with it. But because you have been doing the work, because you have been doing the meditation, the breath work, and all that stuff, and maybe a little bit of studying, you're ready. So when it comes up, you go, I know what this is. I'm ready to face it. And then you face it, and then you resolve it, hopefully, and or you allow it to pass, and that de-energizes it a bit, and with time, it starts to become more and more resolved, and that's that. Right, so in essence, that's the message of this video, right? So you have a mind-body system which protects you from trauma that you are not ready to deal with. There are systematic ways to tease it out and resolve it, and there are casual ways in which it flares up. And when your mind is mature enough, you can use those to resolve the trauma as well. Trauma gets resolved through a combination of stability of focus, equanimity, and presence, right? Focus allows you to observe it correctly and stably and in a lot of detail with high resolution, so to speak, to see it correctly for what it is. Presence is the light of conscious being shined upon that sensation, right? The real you, the higher self, illuminating and allowing you to know it properly. And equanimity is the distance with which you can observe it, as opposed to becoming enmeshed in it, right? So the equanimity is that sort of meta awareness that allows you to stay totally neutral as you observe it, to the point where you can safely go into it and merge with the discomfort while feeling completely safe and not losing yourself in it. And even I would say cultivating feelings of love and compassion for it, because as I mentioned in another video, it is this puppy that has been kicked around for generations on end, which wants to be protected and resolved and loved, right? So that's what you can bring into it when you have the equanimity. And then trauma starts to unwind, and it goes like that, and you feel like suddenly there's flow and there's more connection in the way that you are going about life. So I hope that helps. That was a little video about trauma, how it arises, how it gets resolved, and I hope it helps, and I'll come back for more. Bye.